What's up, everybody? Welcome into Group Chat Football Live. I am Peter Ariz alongside D Money. Good morning to everybody. This portal does not stop. These coaching changes do not stop. This time of year is absolutely crazy, and we appreciate everyone who's been following along with us here on Group Chat Sports. Again, Group Chat Football Live, our daily show, tracking the transfer portal across the country, tracking coach carousel movement. Again, I'm Peter Ariz. That is D Money. And we're excited to go for another day here on Group Chat Football Live.
Yeah, man, just keeping up with the comings and goings. Finally, some commits coming off the board. One thing I'm seeing, and we'll talk about it here with the portal, Pete, is we think something's happening. Everybody sends their crystal balls in one direction. Doesn't sound very good. Everybody's putting in the same crystal ball for a player, and it switches very fast. And then the player ends up going to a different school. And the other school makes sense, but it shows you how quickly these things change. And I think part of the fact that this is the portal, the relationships aren't as deep as they are in high school recruiting. You think everything's going well, but then the agent gets a call and things change very, very quickly. So it's very different than high school recruiting and very interesting to follow.
So we will start actually not with a portal move, D, but with a headline grabber that came out yesterday. And this has been a theme recently, but Michael Vick, the great Michael Vick, is in the mix for multiple head coaching jobs. Interviewed with Norfolk State, program close to home there for him in Virginia. And then, of course, the one that's been making the rounds big time because of the headline attached to it, Sacramento State. So I'm going to pull up the tweet that came out yesterday here, as neither of these programs are, flying high right now. 4-8 season and 3-9 for each of them respectively. But the news that came out again yesterday regarding this one was pretty big. And that is the Adam Schefter tweet that came out that was basically saying that Sacramento State has a $50 million NIL budget. I don't think anyone was able to confirm that they had a $50 million NIL budget for this season, but it seems like it was more of a bundling together of the money that the boosters have kind of committed towards the future here. And again, that's way different than having $50 million to work with this next season. But your thoughts on Michael Vick potentially getting into the head coaching ranks?
Yeah, there's almost two stories, right? The program and the coach. So starting with Vick, he's somebody who obviously, when he first came on the scene, the physical talent, right? And just the ability to do things easily that we've never seen before at the quarterback position. That's what he was known for. Of course, we know about the twists and turns that his life took, forgetting his football career, but just focusing on him after prison. And he was a much different person. You could tell from the way he spoke in the media, but also what people around him were saying, that this is a guy that wasn't taking things for granted, obviously had been humbled by the experience and was trying to help others really at every stop of the way after he left the prison system and got back into the NFL. It was really, he became a veteran leader just that quick with a lot of wisdom and experience, the highs and the lows. So I'm not surprised that he's gone this route because it fits in with the mentorship, trying to help young men avoid some of the pitfalls he had, learn from his mistakes and learn from his successes and the things he's done. So it makes a lot of sense. He's someone that, look, it's kind of like Deion, where even if the players weren't alive to see him in his prime, they can just turn on YouTube and very quickly understand who they're talking to and what they're dealing with. So I like the idea that he's looking at smaller schools here because, Deion didn't go straight to Colorado. He was at Jackson State first. First he was in the high school level, then Jackson State, kind of cut his teeth there and had success before moving on. But this Sacramento State part of it is the interesting one. I think Norfolk State, Mike Vick, like you mentioned, he's from there. That makes perfect sense. Sacramento State is like a whole nother part of this story. And, I want you to chime in, because I know you've been digging into this, Pete, but when I look at the quote from the president of the school, Sacramento State, Dr. Luke Wood, this is a school, I'm not that familiar with the school. They have a 30,000 student enrollment, so they're definitely not small. But Dr. Luke Wood, president of Sacramento State, said, yes, I did meet with Michael Vick about his interest in Sacramento State football and our athletic rise. As you can imagine, given the success of our athletic programs, our football head coach, job is an attractive role. So he kind of made it seem like, look, we did him a favor by interviewing with us. Maybe Vick is trying to get more money from Norfolk State, which again seems to me, just from the outside looking in, to be the more logical fit for him. But Sacramento State moving up to FBS after a rough season, only 3 wins in the Big Sky. Interesting situation there.
Well, and the interesting thing with Vick too is that he's been someone he's been very involved in running his own football camp circuit for a long time. I mean, in terms of like the youth academies and things of that nature. So he has roots in the system in terms of giving back to the community. Probably a lot of guys that he's come in contact with over the years that are coming of age now to go play college football. But with Sacramento State, it really seems like the way that the headlines have come out, the wording of certain things, and the way the athletic director is talking, it seems like a bit of a publicity stunt. And again, when you talk about the $50 million, from what I understand, they obviously aren't spending $50 million on a roster next year. That would be far and away the most expensive roster in college football. But believe there's a commitment from a group of boosters who have said, look, over the course of X amount of years, we are going to put forth this money. Obviously, that needs to be realized. And part of continuing to build your name in the public spotlight is by interviewing, meeting with names like a Mike Vick, who in the coaching world may not mean all that much because he has never coached before. But if you're talking about continuing to get the buzz around your program, if you're trying to attract more boosters, more money in, people who may be, tied in with Vick, so to speak, and his success, you see the people that have come along for the ride with Dion over there, not only on his coaching staff, but the celebrities and all of that buzz, all ties in to the success that they've had over there at Colorado. So I think wherever he ends up, is it going to be the same thing? Probably not that scale of a show, but I think that's what we're seeing here with a lot of the headlines and things of that nature. Sacramento State could be beneficial for them, even if Vick doesn't end up being their head coach.
Yeah, you hear Canes Cat 305 in our chat saying Sacramento State's lying. They've been talking about a stadium for 2 years, and it's a no-show. Sacramento State, baseball first program historically, at least in recent history. So we'll see. They're certainly getting publicity. We're talking about Sacramento State, right?
But we're a nationally renowned YouTube page, so they're getting all the publicity that they want from it.
Absolutely. But, I hope Mike Vick ends up at Norfolk State. I mean, I hope he gets a job wherever he thinks is best. But Norfolk State, to me, that seems like just a natural fit. Lots of great athletes in that area. A lot of great athletes that, for whatever reason, maybe can't go D1 right out of high school or aren't ready to go D1. I think that thing makes a lot of sense for him there at that level with his experience and knowledge. So hope that thing gets done there with Norfolk State.
So just mention Colorado and Coach Prime. They made a big move yesterday, as last night the news broke that the number one defensive tackle, some would say the number one defensive player in the portal, especially after Dylan Thieneman came off the board a couple days ago. But Jahim Otis, defensive tackle from Alabama, big boy. You're talking 6'5", 325, 330, commits to Colorado and Coach Prime. And the interesting thing about this one, D, is you talk about Colorado's success. Obviously, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders going to the next level. But you talk about building a foundation for the long term. Offensive and defensive line, everyone has said since the moment Coach Prime took that job, if he can get the trenches right, we feel like he can build the skill position talent around that. Obviously, Juju Lewis coming in. Some people say he could be the day one starter over there. But this is a great start in terms of the middle of your defensive line.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly the kind of guy you can't get out of high school to Colorado. So defensive line, in my opinion, has always been the separator between the haves and the have-nots in college football. They just tend to go to the SEC or the Big Ten, mostly the SEC, and a lot of them are from that area. I mean, you could not ask for a better example than Otis, who was a top 100 recruit out of Mississippi, right there in the Deep South. He was about 370 pounds in high school. He actually slimmed down to play at Alabama, also played some tight end. So guys with that level is 6'5", so the length is there too. Guys with that level of pure size and then athleticism on the defensive line are just rare commodities. They're always going to have significant value. That's why you see these guys, even if they don't succeed, and this guy had some success at Alabama, but even if they don't succeed, they bounce around because they're just hard to get. You look at the Big 12, This guy was ranked 12th in the nation coming out on the defensive line. The Big 12 did not sign any of the top 12 defensive linemen this year. None of them. No team in the conference. So a team like Colorado, if you're getting those guys at least out of the portal, now you're adding body types that are hard to find in the conference. You listen to his quotes here. He said, this is Otis, he said he wanted to make the team great again. He picked Colorado because of Coach Prime. Also Damian Lewis, who I followed his whole career, going from Texas high school to the University of Miami, then being a first-round pick and having some success in the NFL. Great defensive tackle, great talent, defensive line coach for Colorado. And of course, Warren Sapp, who's an analyst who helps out there, Hall of Fame defensive tackle, also from the Miami Hurricanes. So a lot of mentors, different types of players. Those guys are more three technique penetrators than this big 6'5" behemoth Otis, but they certainly could tell him a lot about the NFL game. And he said, told ESPN, I feel like it's beneficial for me. I feel like I can give a lot of help to this season, meaning the 2025 season, and I will have a coach I can depend on and a position coach leading me the right way. So this is, when you look at Colorado and what they did on the run defense front, they were horrible in Prime's first year, well publicized. Kick that up this year, 34th in the nation against FBS opponents in yards per carry against, only 3.8 yards per carry against. You can't do that without improving the trenches. They did so. You had a guy like Otis, you're in a position to make even more strides as you head into year 3, hopefully, of the Prime era in Colorado. But this is a body type that's just, you can't find them every day out of high school.
Yeah, and just looking at Otis in particular, this is a guy who, as a freshman and sophomore, had really solid production for that position. Obviously, you don't expect these guys to be eating up sack numbers, but 29 tackles his freshman year, 26 his sophomore year. And then this year was battling some injuries early in the season and then opts out October 7th. So this is a guy who opted out pretty early into the season here. So going to be interesting to see how he kind of rebounds from that, having not really, it's going to have been a while since he'd played football once the season kicks off next year.
Defensive tackles, unless they go to jail for life, they're always going to have a chance to play. You know, opting out early is obviously not a crime. Some schools, might not look that well on something like that, but because of the rare physical dimensions this player has, the position he plays, those kind of things get forgiven more easily. And I think Colorado, there's going to be certainly a need for him. He's going to play as much as he can, play physically. Of course, at that size, you do need to rotate a little bit. But if Deion is going to stay at Colorado, and I hope he does as a college football fan, as a fan of that program, which when I was growing up was the top program or one of the top programs, and is now in the national conversation, you're going to have a freshman quarterback in Juju Lewis who can help you compete every single year. You're looking at potentially a Caden Salter, guys of that nature coming in as a quarterback. So you're not going to replace Shedeur Sanders, but you could still have a very good Big 12 offense. This position, this defensive line position, is where you could separate yourself from the other teams in that conference.
So moving along here, D, will stay in the trenches as our boy Billy Belichick has gotten his first signee at North Carolina, and that's Cristo Kelly, a center from Holy Cross. I don't think we could have expected any differently here from Bill Belichick, just going completely off the board and signing an offensive lineman from Holy Cross. Kind of reminds me of when the Patriots took Cole Strange out of Chattanooga in the first round a few years ago, the interior offensive lineman. Belichick loves his interior offensive linemen. Obviously, these guys have to be really smart up here. And Cristo Kelly coming over from Holy Cross, all conference guy. There is some ties to Holy Cross for Belichick, as his daughter is the head women's lacrosse coach. But UNC has to replace a lot in the trenches there. And look, I can't say that we've broken down the film necessarily on this one. We're going to have to trust Bill Belichick's eye here, but pretty par for the course for what you would expect right off the bat here.
And actually, I did watch his high school film, Pete. That's in. Go ahead and pull it up here. The huddle. Okay. I have it in the breakdown. Played in Illinois, so he's not from North Carolina at all, and he's not from Massachusetts, even though he went to Holy Cross. Played left tackle in high school, athletic-looking player. Can tell he had some height to him, which is important when you're projecting forward from these smaller school guys. You can't get any taller, right? You can get bigger and stronger, but you're not going to get any taller. So he had height. He was a left tackle, plays center for Holy Cross the last 2 seasons. Also says he has some long snapping experience. That's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, Belichick very, very focused on specialists. But an athletic looking player to my eyes, when you see him at left tackle, just running around, he's put on some weight. They list him at 305. If you're in North Carolina, you've lost Willie Lampkin, who's your starting right guard. He's out of eligibility. Your left tackle, Howard Sampson, he's gone in the portal. You were able to bring back your left guard, who's a true freshman starter. You have a 1-year eligibility left with Austin Blasky at center. So you have some experience interior lineman, but you're also replacing guys. So someone like this who, he plays center, but maybe he can also play guard for you. Maybe you can move someone else to guard. It gives you some versatility inside.
Which is a staple for Belichick. We saw over the years with the Patriots how many guys on the offensive line he moved all over the place. And to have that versatility is a huge weapon for him. And
I got to say, I mean, look, in his high school highlights, I have not seen the Holy Cross highlights, but you do see the appeal for being a taller player. At 6'4", he's going to be a taller center. He can get low. He can get under guys. He has a little bit of pop to him. Illinois, I mean, he's not playing against, the best competition, but he's out there. He's out there striking guys. And very curious to see how he looks at Holy Cross and how he translates there to North Carolina. It's the ACC, so you're not going against elite defensive lines every single week, but it's going to be a significant step up from the Patriot League. So on brand first move for Bill Belichick, first of many, but you heard Mike Lombardi, the GM, say they need to improve their offensive line significantly. That was identified as an area of weakness. And one thing about offensive line, when you look at the history of the position, it takes numbers in the college level. You really don't know who's going to hit. You just got to add numbers that you feel good about the traits and see who gains weight, who does the right things off the field, who takes to your system. There's just so much to project from a high school offensive lineman to a college offensive lineman that you really do need to throw numbers at the position. I've seen it with guys coming from this level of competition. The first day they show up and you say, we got a lemon. This is not going to work. Or they show up the first day and you say, you got something. Usually you find out pretty quick how that level jump's going to be. Obviously, Belichick just got there. He's trying to make things happen. There are going to be some swings and misses, but there's a swing that makes a lot of sense knowing the history of the player and knowing the history of the coach and the players he likes, I should say. And this is a guy with athletic ability and height to at least build something off. And he was productive at the level he was at.
Moving along here, Dan Mullen has his first pickup at UNLV as Jaylen Glover, who was at Utah the last few years. The guy originally from the state of Florida, was a 4-star recruit on the 247 composite coming out of high school, coming out of Lake Gibson, Florida. And this is a guy who, another opt-out for Utah in November, but someone who had over 1,000 yards in his career, wasn't really featured for Utah's offense this year. But taking a look at the film, which I'm going to pull up here in just a second, this is a guy who, he's got some ability, man. He's built like Doug Martin, man, the muscle hamster, if you remember him from Boise State and the Bucks. But I'm going to pull up the tape right here. As you can see, Jaylen posted these highlights a few days, not a few days ago, back in November when he announced his decision to transfer. But you see the balance, you see the toughness that he runs with. And Dan Mullen, we know his offensive mind, good piece for him right off the bat at UNLV.
Couple comments here, by the way. Like and subscribe to this podcast. If you're watching this show, we're giving you everything across the country, including the latest on UNLV, which we think is going to be an up-and-coming program. But Brandon's saying good pickup for Mullen, and Kane's Cat, Heat 305 saying Mullen for sure knew him from his time in Florida. So I wanted to bring that up because Glover, you see him here on the west side of the country at Utah. He is, like you mentioned, from Lake Gibson, Florida, Lakeland. And those of you who know the Florida program, know the state of Florida, the Lakeland region. So Ray Lewis is from that area, not these high schools, but he's from that area. That is a huge, huge region in the state of Florida for football. While Ray Lewis went to Miami, a lot of these guys go to the University of Florida. So this is an area that Dan Mullen knew very, very, very well when he was at the University of Florida. He knows the kind of players that come out of this region. Is more in the north central part of the state, by the lakes. That's why they call it Lakeland. But Glover, somebody who played basketball, he had some decent speed. There you see the shape. Look at the athleticism there. You see him he ran about 11.2 in high school, so he had some speed, but you saw that shake as a pass catcher. When I think about Mullen at Florida, Kadarius Toney was one of his top weapons. He found a million ways to scheme up Kadarius Toney, get him in those one-on-one matchups, use his receiving ability, and allow him to make big plays despite not being a 220-pound bruiser. So, again, you see the moves that Glover shows. I'm not saying he's Kadarius Toney, but if you look at film, and I'm sure UNLV fans watching this, you guys are pouring into film of what Mullen did at Florida. Watch how he used Kadarius Toney, and you can see something similar with Glover and his quickness.
Yeah, the open field ability, the cuts, the jump cuts. And again, man, he's strong. He's running with power. He's not just an elusive guy. You saw him there in the practice clip, because look, there were some practice clips there, but there was a lot of game film. But one of those practice clips, man, he met a linebacker in the hole in pass pro, and you could see the thud that he holds in those pads as well. So good pickup, man. I mean, these are the types of guys that if you're Dan Mullen, it's you're finding value in a guy who was not really used at a Utah too much this year, but at the same time does have the experience at that level and does have really good film at this level as well. So excited to see Jaylen Glover in that offense, like you said, but good pickup here for the Rebels.
Yeah, but we got Heart of Sports in the chat. He's saying 437 subs is insane for this pod. We just started last week, man, so appreciate your support jumping in the chat. If you're new to us, like and subscribe. We are talking about portal moves and recruiting, coaching, anything that's happening in college football every day. We're bringing it to you. You don't have to go anywhere else. You got a one-stop hub to learn about everything that's happening in football, both on this extended live show and in the shorter videos that we're putting out every day. So trying to make sure that the listeners to this show are the most educated college football fans on the planet, because they're seeing the team construction piece by piece by pieces. This is what you see on Saturday. It happens in the offseason with all of these different moves on the coaching staff, on the recruiting trail, of course, with the portal. And this is one I think is going to affect how UNLV looks next year. I'm very, very excited about this particular program. And I did the video when Mullen first came there. I think this can be a perennial playoff team. Mullen's going to take care of that quarterback position. I feel confident about it with the portal. He's just going to be able to bring in guys off of his reputation and get the most out of them. They just need players. There's better players in that region that there ever have been. Nevada's producing some really, really good players. Arizona, Utah's always got good guys. There's guys in that area that can play ball. And there's guys like this from Florida. Maybe they went to a West Coast school like Glover did, but he is somebody who fits right in as going to bring that Florida athleticism to a UNLV program, and a coach in Dan Mullen that knows how to use it.
So we've been trending towards this, D, but Dabo Swinney and Clemson have taken their first non-QB portal transfer in the Dabo Swinney era, Tristan Smith. So this is one that's kind of off the board in a sense, as Tristan Smith, a transfer wide receiver from Southeast Missouri State, comes over to the Tigers. This is a guy who's originally from LaGrange, Georgia. I believe that's where Reuben Foster's originally from. So got some dogs out of that area in Georgia. But 6'5", 205, 76 receptions, 934 yards, and 6 touchdowns last season. And I'm going to pull up some clips here that are already making the rounds. You talked about it a couple days ago when we spoke about Will Helt, Purdue edge, who was going to be visiting Clemson. And you said, look, with Dabo, a lot of this is finding the right sort of character guys to bring to the locker room. And right here, this is a play where Tristan Smith's teammate fumbled, and you see him there, number one, tracking him down. You see the length on this strip right here. Boom. I mean, you see some of the traits that he's working with. Again, 6'5", 205 listed at, was very productive this season. Huge step up in competition. But this is what you're looking for. If Dabo saw this right here and he didn't need to see anything else. As I'm going to pull up some of his other actual clips, catching the football. There's some dancing in there as well. But this is a very telling clip for me here, D.
Yeah, and I love the approach. I'm not saying I love the approach for Dabo of not going to the portal at all, but the idea that you're going to preserve your culture even as you go in the portal, that's so important to me, is getting guys it's hard to know these guys, right? Because you're learning about them quickly. It's not like recruiting where you learn about them over time. But when you feel very good based on the reports, the due diligence, what you see on film, that some guy's going to add to your room from a character standpoint, from a culture standpoint, from an effort standpoint, the way they practice, the way they perform, it makes you feel much better about putting him in the room. Even if it doesn't work out football-wise, you're not going to drag their team down by bringing in an outsider with a bad attitude. So that play to me is very telling. I'm sure Dabo did a ton of research on this player. Look at the need at receiver for Clemson. You had Noble Johnson transferring a backup receiver, Troy Stiletto, who we know from down here in South Florida. He's gone. So the Clemson only has 8 scholarship receivers on the roster for 2025. They usually like to be closer to 10. So the fact that they brought somebody in here to just make those numbers make sense, not a big surprise. Obviously a huge opportunity for Tristan Smith. I'm sure he jumped at it. Position of strength in terms of the top end for Clemson: Antonio Williams, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, all coming back, all super talented young receivers. I think Clemson could be a preseason top 5 team, certainly with what they're bringing back on offense. But they needed depth, and there's a player who can help fill that depth need while also keeping the culture of the program. The football-wise, I mean, you see some length, you see some good energy, you see the ability to make some contested catches. It's going to be a tough battle to crack the rotation of the guys I mentioned who are premier players, 5-star type players who are already have experience and are rising players in the ACC. But you need depth. That's the name of the game. You can't just get by with your top guys. You need depth. And in this era of 105 scholarships, it makes a lot of sense to bring in a player like this in.
And this is a guy who, coming out of high school, again at LaGrange in Georgia, didn't have any offers, went straight to Hutchinson Community College at the junior college level. Now he was listed as 6'5", 189. So was it a weight thing? Was it an academics thing? Was it, maybe he wasn't there as a football player yet, but obviously he's come a long way as he had a very productive year. But you can't teach that length at that position, man. You can, in the red zone, it could be a real threat.
Yeah. And again, I think sticking with the culture, sticking with the program, we need some depth here. We'll get him in. We trust him. He's building the team, meaning Dabo, the way he wants to build it. The top guys are going to be guys he recruited in high school. This is going to be someone who's not going to disrupt the apple cart. If he produces, unbelievable. He's got a chip on his shoulder coming from the level he's coming from. It just makes sense with what Clemson is trying to build. And look, they had one of the best offenses in the country doing it their way. They won the ACC. If I'm Dabo, I'm not saying I need to change everything I do. I'm feeling pretty good about the way I do things. But with high school recruiting slipping a little bit for Clemson, you do need to supplement with the portal. Plus, you're losing guys. So just sheer numbers. If you're losing guys to the portal, you have to add in the portal as well, or else you're just not going to have enough players to practice the way you want to practice. So that's part of this too.
Now, moving on to a bit of a more high-profile wide receiver that made his move in the portal yesterday. Kiron Hudson comes over from USC to Penn State. And then Penn State, talk about the good news for them yesterday. Quarterback Drew Aller announced that he's returning, a guy who could be near the top of the boards next year at the quarterback position when it comes to the draft. You'd have to think that these two moves were sort of connected, right? Hudson probably got some word that Aller was returning, made that decision a little bit easier. Some of you guys may remember Hudson for making that one-handed grab in week 1 against LSU. That went pretty viral. This is a guy from Mater Dei, one of the top programs in the country in California. 6'1", 205, 38 catches, 462 yards, and 3 touchdowns for USC this season. A lot of change at USC. Seems like a lot of guys going in and out over there for Lincoln Riley. But you got to really like this pickup here for James Franklin and Penn State. Someone coming in who's played a lot of football, and he's built well, man. He's a strong receiver.
Yes, what a change in the world, right? That we're talking about a receiver leaving Lincoln Riley for Penn State because of uncertainty at quarterback with the Lincoln Riley team, right? So it's a lot of change in the college football world. That's not a sentence that you would have expected a couple of years ago, but it is the reality. I think Drew Aller is going to be the preseason #1 quarterback in the country, certainly from an NFL standpoint. So to team with him makes a lot of sense. Penn State's needed receivers. It seems like forever Penn State has tried to get that receiver room up to par with what Ohio State has been playing with in the Big Ten. Now you have Oregon coming in the Big Ten, and they have extraordinary wide receivers. They added to Corian Moore, so they're going to have another true freshman sensation next year on top of what they already bring back. So you need to keep up with the receiver arms race in the Big Ten, even though the conditions aren't always conducive to passing. So these teams are able to pass the ball like Ohio State and Oregon. You got to keep up. I think with this player, Hudson is a really, really tough guy. He comes from a great program in Mater Dei. He went to USC. He very much is a Big Ten type player. And look, I understand USC is in the Big Ten now, but what I mean by that, this is a Midwest cold weather type of player because he can make physical catches. He's very tough after the catch. He likes to block. He's a good blocker. Again, he comes from a really good high school program. So you bring him in to catch passes, to do one-handed catches like he did at USC, but you also need to fit that character of the team. And I think he fits in what Penn State wants to do. And Penn State is going to run the ball. Even if you have Drew Aller, they're going to run the ball. You're seeing them in the playoffs here. Their game plan is going to be to run it with their two outstanding backs. I don't see that changing over time, even as they become a more Drew Aller-centered approach. So you want to add guys that are tough and fit in with that, while at the same time adding receivers to your quarterback who you've convinced to stay and who's going to be potentially be a top 10 pick. By the way, I wonder how much of the pitch to make him stay had to do with, listen, you were this effective without having great receivers, and Penn State did not have great receivers this year, at least compared to their competition. Maybe James Franklin said, look, we are going to make sure that you have elite receivers if you come back. We got guys in the portal that we feel good about. We're going to get you some guys. You're going to be throwing it to a really, really strong cast of characters. You don't have to look at Ohio State and be jealous all the time of what Will Howard has or what, Stroud had before, or whoever it is, Cal McCord. You could feel good about what you have at receiver. And a guy like Hudson is a major step in that direction for Penn State of building around Drew Aller while maintaining their personality.
Yeah, that's why I said the timing of both of those announcements coming out couldn't have been any sort of coincidence. Definitely convinced each other there to come back and for him to come over from USC.
Yeah, and what I'm watching is that, just look at Penn State stats this year, 41st in passing yards per game against D1 competition. Obviously, the Big Ten's not the most pass-happy conference, but USC was number 9 in the country in that category. So he's going to want the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see, does Penn State become more of a pass-happy offense with a Drew Aller and these receivers that you are for sure selling on having a role catching the football, not only blocking for Penn State's outstanding running game.
Appreciate everyone on here. Got about 20 people watching live with us. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I know some of you guys in here know D-Money and I from Kane's Insight. This is our other page, Group Chat Sports. This is our show, Group Chat Football Live. We go live every day talking the latest in the transfer portal across the country.
Real quick, before we switch topics, Rock and Rant had a question about the 105 scholarships. As I understand it, certainly from University of Miami's perspective, and I imagine other teams in the ACC and other conferences, they are planning for the 105 moving forward. So they're making moves as far as bringing in extra offensive linemen, bringing in extra specialists with the idea that they're going to have 105 scholarships. I can tell you that is certainly how the University of Miami's operating, and I don't think they are alone in that.
So looking at a pretty intriguing move that was announced yesterday, the Billy Edwards, former quarterback at Maryland, announced his decision to transfer to Wisconsin. This is a guy that we talked about a lot last week when there were rumors popping up about him potentially. I believe he got some crystal balls to Michigan, which was an interesting situation there, as we understand Bryce Underwood coming in. But Billy Edwards is a guy with a lot of physical tools, and we both said it the other day, man, this is a guy who, we're not saying he's going to be a first-round pick or anything like that, but looks like a guy with some ability to potentially play at the next level, to stick around. Again, 6'4", 220, good completion percentage, 65% this year. But hopefully, if you're Wisconsin, surround him with a good offensive line, strong running game, and get things back on track. Probably a lot of a similar pitch as what they probably gave to Tyler Van Dyke last year when he came over from Miami. Obviously, Van Dyke tore his ACL early in the season, so that was out the window pretty early. But Billy Edwards, I like this pickup for Wisconsin.
Total overhaul, Wisconsin, of their passing game. So last year they had Phil Longo. They brought in Van Dyke. Van Dyke gets hurt. The passing game is one of the worst in the country for Wisconsin. Longo ends up getting fired. They bring in veteran Jeff Grimes, most recently at Kansas. He was previously at Baylor, BYU. He's somebody who's been around the block, and has, he knows what he's doing out there. He's not somebody, it's not your young hot coordinator that you're excited about, but this is somebody who is experienced and a steady hand, and he's only going to be as good as his quarterback. So once that move is secured and you feel good about who your coordinator is and what your vision is, you have to add the quarterback piece. And I think, what they thought they were getting with Van Dyke last year, obviously the injury, who can predict that? But you're getting that with Billy Edwards. He really reminds me of, we made this comparison before Wisconsin was even in the picture, that he just reminds us of Tyler Van Dyke. 6'4", 219. The size is almost identical. 4.4 shuttle in high school. Van Dyke was in that range, so quicker than you'd expect. This is somebody who's kind of your quintessential cold weather quarterback, that big body, that toughness. He brings an element as a short yardage runner, which Van Dyke didn't have. Van Dyke was not the most unathletic guy in the world, but Edwards is more athletic, 13 career rushing touchdowns, short yardage runner. Had a pretty good season at Maryland last year individually, third in the Big Ten in passing yards, 2,881 yards, 65% passer, 15 touchdowns, 9 picks. The yards per attempt was low. Maryland was not a dynamic downfield offense with 6.9 yards per attempt. You may see something similar like that with the Wisconsin. They're traditionally a ball control type of offense. We'll see how Grimes wants to do it, but you could see this being that kind of offense just because of the weather, because of the way the team likes to play. But Edwards fits that. He's going to get you short yardage with his running. He's going to protect the ball. He's going to keep you ahead of the sticks. Low 3-star from Virginia, originally signed with Wake Forest, goes to Maryland, played behind Talia. The season for Maryland wasn't that good this year, again, 4-8, but he played well. And I think he saw the writing on the wall with Malik Washington, highly touted quarterback, local quarterback, going to Maryland, blue chipper, multi-sport kid who's Maryland's really excited about. So he goes, he says, I'm not going to be stuck behind the next star. He originally was projected to Michigan, and maybe he saw in Michigan what he saw in Maryland, which is Michigan's bringing in the number 1 quarterback in the country. I don't want to be his backup or in a quarterback controversy with him. Goes to Wisconsin, storied program, Big Ten. And I think he's going to have a little more flexibility to run this show. He certainly deserves it. This is a guy I think has a chance to be an NFL quarterback, not a first rounder, nothing like that, but somebody who gets paid to play football. I could see it with Billy Edwards. He's got size, he's got a good arm, he's athletic, and he's got experience.
So we're going to wrap things up here on the Group Chat Football Live show with a couple of journeyman quarterbacks. This first one here is he's the definition of a journeyman, and that is TJ Finley, who's now going to his 5th school. He's headed to Tulane. Darian Mensah headed to Duke, was probably the number 1 quarterback in the portal until John Mateer entered here from Washington State. But Mensah had a really nice breakout year there for Tulane with Coach John Summerall. And this is a guy in TJ Finley who coming out of high school, as we see this graphic here, went to LSU, was not a huge recruit in terms of the star rankings, was a 3-star recruit in the class of 2020, but Bama wanted him, Auburn wanted him, chose to go to LSU, had all the tools. It still does. 6'6", 230-plus pound quarterback with a big arm. But as you see here, LSU, Auburn didn't work out there, was at Texas State and put up his best numbers of his career there at Texas State. Goes to Western Kentucky this last year, gets hurt early in the season, has to have surgery. By the time he comes back in November, Caden Veldenkamp has already cemented himself as the starter, and he's not able to win that job back from him. So TJ Finley to Tulane, this is an interesting one because of obviously how many places he's been, but he's following a guy in Darian Mensah who had such a really good season that Coach Summer obviously sees the tools to work with here if you're TJ Finley.
Yeah, he's a hometown guy, right? So he is from Louisiana, going back to New Orleans, obviously with Tulane. He's from Ponchatoula. Hopefully I pronounced that right. But I think if you're Tulane, you kept your Coach Summerall. Mensah's gone, big ticket item. I'm sure he got more money than you probably wanted to pay at Tulane. So look, let him move on. You can't play that game. That's fine. You're actually getting a more experienced passer with TJ Finley. They don't want to take a step back as a program. They've had so many positive seasons strung together that they do not want to go in the other direction. And the best way to maintain that is to bring in a guy who has played in the SEC, who has played at G5, over 6,000 yards and 37 touchdowns, but still to me has upside in the right system. And 6'7", 238, that's the kind of the headliner. His whole career, he's been the biggest quarterback we've seen. Usually when he's on the field, he's got a monster arm, huge arm. I mean, he almost looks like Jamarcus Russell. Not to compare it to another guy from that area, but, you know, this is a guy that just really, really has some physical traits. And I think with now the game slowing down for him, he's seen so much. He's learned so much. He's older. He's just an older human being, a more mature, wise human being, like any of us would be after all those different stops. This could be his breakout year. And say class of 2020 breakout year in 2025. But the pieces are there. He's in a stable program. And hopefully we see, you know, Mensa, one of the things he did, play action, run game, downfield. This is your classic play action, bomb it downfield quarterback. When you look at his size, when you look at his arm strength, the system fit makes sense. Mensa was one of the most efficient passers in the country as far as being a downfield passer, yards per attempt. I believe he ranked third, tied with Cam Ward. You would like to see TJ Finley be one of those league leaders in yards per attempt, a nationwide leader in yards per attempt, because that means he's using that strong arm, bombing it down the field, play action game with this running game. I love the fit. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm sure it's a lot cheaper than what you're talking about with Darian Mensa going to Duke. So you can solve other issues that you have on that team. Make sure your talent stays where it's been, as Tulane's been very, very competitive at the G5 level, at a quarterback with experience, and still has significant upside. I don't think we've seen the best out of TJ Finley at the college level. This could be the year. And
this is just crazy, man. This just shows you how long he's been around. This is Coach O giving him the business back at LSU. But no, this is a guy he's seen it all at the college level, man. So best of luck to him after that injury last year. And good fit for him, man. It's got to be cool for him to go back home.
I feel like Coach O is not that small. I mean, look how small he looks compared to this guy.
Yeah.
This is one. I got to think he's the biggest quarterback in college football. It has to be.
Yeah, big boy. That's for sure. This next guy we're going to talk about is not the biggest quarterback in the world, but he's someone who's very, very accomplished, especially at the FCS level, and someone that you and I are very familiar with from his one season here at the University of Miami. Reese Poffenbarger goes to North Texas, guy who, as this says here, had a prolific FCS career at Albany, you know, threw for 3,600 yards and 36 touchdowns last season, had some opportunities potentially to go to other Power 4 programs, came to Miami in January, and at the time there was a chance that he, you know, was going to be Miami's starter. Miami was still pursuing Cam Ward. Obviously that ended up working out pretty well for them. But this is a guy that Miami thought could play at this level. Obviously, I know we both had a chance to see him live and practice at certain points at Miami. Good arm, solid arm, good athlete. Again, not anything like TJ Finley in terms of his size, but he's a gamer.
Yeah, I like this fit. Certainly, if you're Reese Poffenbarger, you're ecstatic about this fit, seeing the production that this offense has had. You know, with Chandler Morris last year, Coach Morris has really done a phenomenal job of getting production out of his quarterbacks. And again, this fit for Poffenbarger is perfect. Poffenbarger is one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best players in the FCS in 2023 for Albany. Led him as far as they've ever been as a program. You see some of the highlights here of his time at Albany. Dual threat passer, running, throwing, making a lot of plays. He was a basketball player in high school in that DMV area. I believe he was actually from Maryland. And he had a lot of hops, ends up going to Old Dominion, transfers to Albany. And that's when he really takes off. I saw him practice a ton at the University of Miami. So I saw him up close many, many, many times. Played garbage time. But again, the practice is when you really got to see what he could do. He's more of an arm strength guy than an accuracy guy, which is when you see him, you don't think of him that way because he's smaller, but he's very much a guy that the ball jumps out of his hands, quick twitch thrower. Accuracy is good, not great, probably less than what you had with Morris last year, but the arm strength should be comparable, if not better even. And the athletic ability is there as well. Morris was a good athlete. Poffenbarger's a good athlete. Like I mentioned, basketball player throwing down dunks in high school. He can move around. He can run for yards on top of scrambling to create throws. gunslinger mentality. He will throw interceptions. That's going to be what you're negative with Poffenbarger. He will throw picks, but he'll throw it downfield. And I think the challenge for him in this system is kind of staying on time, trusting the system that's been so productive for so many players, and doing his thing in the pocket. But when the play breaks down, that's when he can make his offensive coordinator right, because he does have athletic ability. His arm at the G5 level, I think, is going to be well above average. I mean, I know he's an FCS quarterback, but I think G5, that arm is going to be well above average. It'll play, and the athleticism is good. Experienced player, had a ton of snaps for Albany. It was relied upon to make plays for them, was the best player in the FCS in 2023, and led them to their best season. Miami's been coached up with, look, you could say this was a throwaway year because Cam Ward came and took his spot and was Heisman finalist for Miami, but he's had a lot of reps with Coach Shannon Dawson, who's going to be a Broyles contender, was a Broyles contender this year. He had a ton of reps in the #1 offense in America, which was Miami this year. So he saw what that looked like. He was operating at a high level, even though he didn't play as much as he would have wanted. I think this was a positive experience for him, seeing what the FBS level looks like, seeing what the #1 offense at the FBS level looks like, and now transitioning into a system that is going to be tailored to his game, that is, I don't know, tailored to his game, but more suitable for his game. Certainly level of competition, I think, is more suitable to where he's at physically, but at level of competition where he'll be physically more than good enough for. And that playmaking instinct, you can't coach it. He makes a lot of plays in practice. He likes to scramble around, look downfield. He is not going to be a passive player. I like the fit. Certainly for Poffenbarger, you couldn't ask for a better spot given the prior production. But I think North Texas is going to like Poffenbarger, assuming he can protect the ball while still maintaining those playmaker instincts to make plays downfield.
Unfortunately, he got work against a group of 5 defense in practice at Miami too. Our Canes fans will appreciate that one. But no, I agree with you. I think the speed of the game that he was able to see with some of the caliber of athletes at Miami on the defense side of the ball that he was up against every day should make that transition for him a bit easier to North Texas.
Yeah, and again, I know Morris had probably more athleticism than people gave him credit for nationally. I think Poffenbarger, at a minimum, is going to replace that aspect of his game.
All right, D. Well, we appreciate everyone who has been on here with us. Again, getting some good, consistent numbers here on the live shows recently, so we appreciate that. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. Again, this is Group Chat Football Live coming at you every day here. Different time every day, but pretty much here in the middle of the day. So just put that subscription on so that you get our notifications. You see when we go live, and then we cut all of these videos up so you can kind of see them piece by piece after the fact as well. So we'll be back tomorrow. Like and subscribe. See you guys tomorrow.